Hi, everybody. My name's Carter Brennan. I'm CEO of Connected Technologies. Delighted to be presenting on Security by Live. Some of you may remember me from my days of running Webway One, which was procured by CSL Dualcom back in June 2018. But Connected is a completely separate business from that, and we're a cloud-based platform designed for ARCs, installers, and end users for business analytics and alarm management. Today, though, we're going to talk about how cloud can really change that narrative in security system management and monitoring, changing how we do things today to a more browser and app-based solution, all managed in the cloud. So we'll just crack straight on with that and just talk a little bit about the kind of communications evolution that's gone on over the last couple of decades. It's quite incredible to perceive really that broadband technology wasn't really available until about 2003, 2004. Broadband wasn't even available in every local exchange by then, probably only just. And the advent of the first cloud providers like Google, Azure, and AWS were around 2006 to 2008. It seems very ubiquitous now, but it really is a relatively young technology, but it's taken incredible traction across the world. And in 2007, we had the advent of the iPhone and the App Store in 2008 rather. And within a year, apps were downloaded 1 billion times off that app store. 4G arrived in 2009. And after that, we saw the advent of incredibly powerful mobile devices, laptops, iPads, phones, 4G phones, that is, and wearables. The reason I'm saying this is because this technology has really, become like the true invention of the wheel on the internet. I mean, we all talked about, there was the wheel and then there's the internet, but actually empowering people to use the internet, I think, has really been over the last sort of 15 years, where we've seen very high-speed communications and all these fabulous hardware tools that we see today. And the growth has been astonishing from its inception. So by 2017, on the slide there, you see that the App Store actually had, or Apple's App Store had 130 billion downloads by then. And then the advent of 5G, things just getting better, faster, cheaper. That's really the whole mantra of communications evolution. And what we can see underneath that is the emergence of these huge cloud-based platforms. Everyone pretty much is on LinkedIn. A lot of people use Dropbox for storage, and we have other social media platforms like Twitter coming on stream. So LinkedIn was formed in 2003. Dropbox 2007 and Twitter 2006. As you can see there, they've got hundreds of millions of users. LinkedIn 250 million, Dropbox 500 million, Twitter 336 million. These are a couple of years out of date, these figures, but the growth will have continued and is just simply more than that. But interestingly, we also see other products like Slack, which is a messaging system mainly for development teams and internal departments. Some of you may know it, and our platform integrates to it. What's interesting there is that it was developed in 2013, has 8 million users at that point, but was worth $7.1 billion. So its forward value was incredibly high. And all of this just goes to underpin that really many industries, market segments, businesses and their departments are using cloud technology to really improve the way that their businesses run, deliver efficiencies, better customer service, more margin, et cetera. And I think in the security industry, we haven't quite adopted that yet. And there's a number of fundamental reasons why, which we'll go into in a second, and we can talk about how we kind of solve those issues at Connected. Some of you may say, well, why isn't Facebook on here? Well, to be honest, on the scale of this, Facebook would just be a sea of blue covering the entire slide. It's so big, I can't even fit it on the slide, but literally it would just be a background of blue. That's how big Facebook is in the scheme of things. But we won't go into Facebook here. So on a little bit to some of the challenges that still exist in security, and we've talked a lot there about how the cloud technology has evolved across time. But if we look to the left of that slide, actually in the legacy environment, we all used to have servers, email servers, file servers, etc., all on premises. So this is the on premises world, and we still partly exist in that world in the security industry. And that's with things like receivers in monitoring stations and databases within the monitoring station, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as monitoring stations have grown, they've had to accommodate this technology. And as we know, the security industry does like to hang on to things that ain't broke and you don't need to fix. And we're obviously seeing a rub of that at the moment with things like PSTN switch off and stuff like that. And there's a lot of legacy technology within the ARC, which is fine because a lot of it works. But when we look at bringing cloud technology into the mix, it actually isn't fine, and it creates an awful lot of inefficiency and a lot of drag on the way in which ARCs installers and end users experience the use of data and information, mitigating risk and looking at performance. There's a tremendous amount of kind of technical debt in there created by on-premises solutions. And let me just explain that a little bit further. Just before that, a little lightheartedness. If anyone's watched Austin Power and he comes out of his cryogenic chamber, he'd certainly know, he wouldn't really know how to dress today, or what's called to drink, etc. But he'd definitely be able to operate a spreadsheet in security operations. Now that's a quote from the CEO of a company called Coda, which is huge on the internet. It's all about driving efficiencies in businesses. But I do think that rings very true in the security industry today. We're receiving emails, PDFs, spreadsheets, etc., and that's generated by this kind of architecture. Some of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with this, but I will go through this for others to understand how this data actually gets into the hands of security teams. What we have to the left is we have security devices. So they could be alarm panels that are connected to the CSL network or the RedCare network or other products for signaling, or it could be alarm panels with their own built-in signaling products like the Texcom SmartCom, etc., or the Eaton products, all signaling into their own cloud-based platforms. And then those cloud-based platforms or hosted platforms, as some are delivering data into the ARC, into that sort of stacked receiver block that I show you there in black, just to the right of the cloud. So those are the on-prem receivers that the ARCs have to install generally to receive these signals from these products. Those alarms are then ingested into a database, and an operator can see those alarms. However, if the end user security team, which is to the far right, wants to get reports out of that system, because they are on premises, quite often their reporting capabilities are relatively poor. They're kind of stuck back in the 90s. And the only way of getting data out of these kind of Windows-based environments, etc., is to use rather antiquated technology like Crystal Reports, or just get a CSV export or something. And then someone in the ARC has to kind of look at that from a sales ops point of view, put all that together, and perhaps email that to the loss prevention team at the end user. Now, they probably have to hire a data analyst to then put that in the context of their business, because the ARC just isn't really geared to provide customization at scale. So the ARC is doing its very, very best. There's no criticism there, but basically what they can do is they can draw this data out and then give it to the end user, say, well, you put it in the context of your operation. You know, you might have different open and close times for high street stores, out of town, storerooms, all this sort of stuff. Security team's got to put all that in context of their business and then present that to their users, distribute it, etc. You can see the pain of doing that. And if you want to do that with multiple reports, it becomes, incredibly difficult, time consuming. And in fact, the data is late by the time you've got it. So it's all a bit of a mess, really, and not a lot of value whatsoever to anybody. And you can see that process is driven by the fact that a lot of this receiving capability is sort of like stuck on premises using relatively old technology and not modern cloud-based technology. Our customers have said things like, this is a quote from Adrian Sherry at Next. He said, we have to make decisions faster than our decision support systems can handle. So that process there was exactly what they were suffering from. It was damaging the relationship with their supplier. Their supplier wanted to fix that, obviously, did a great job doing so, and sold them our product to resolve that whole issue, and in fact give them much, much more capability. So if we go a little bit further and talk about what we preach really context-driven security. And what we're talking about there is each user being able to see the data how they want to see it. So an ARC wants to see it in a certain way, an installer wants to see it in a certain way, an end user wants to see it in a certain way, and so does then the rest of the supply chain, things like key holding companies, guarding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on the left-hand side, we have the sort of multi-vendor environment that many businesses run. So you have alarm transmission service providers, you'll have lone worker, et cetera, and all of that data is going to the bottom there to the ARC, which is basically a slightly different version of the diagram that I just showed you. Now, the best manufacturers, and this is a piece of advice from us and probably many other cloud providers that we work with, is sometimes I think a lot of the time security products are picked by what does the hardware do. We think that going forward, buyers of security equipment should start looking at what does the software do? Does the software have an open API? Does this piece of hardware have a cloud-based platform that will make it interoperable with many different things? And that's the first sort of circle there that says data exchange APIs. Don't worry about the term API. It's just a way of making platforms interoperable with one another. So we've developed software interfaces, software APIs into Redcare, Dualcom, and other systems, which means that we don't interrupt the flow of the alarms going from the hardware to the ARC. We can access that to the side, no interruption to service, but then process all of that stuff that you were doing in emails and spreadsheets and things like that in the cloud and present it in a much more ingestible way for the end user. So using the power of the cloud to translate, quite complex pieces of data into icons and colors and alerts and notifications, automated calls, emails, all of those things, but all managed in the cloud. Now, you couldn't do this before really because what you'd have needed at the installer or the end user is a receiver from all of these providers. So everybody would have had to install a receiver. You can imagine the complexity for companies like Redcare and Dualcom of trying to put a receiver into every single installer and every single ARC, and then duplicating all the events to everybody in order for them to get to see this information. Clearly, it's much easier to use some kind of cloud-based platform, whether it's ours or someone else's, but one with those software interfaces to those systems, and you being as the user, installer, ARC, or end user, being able to access that over ubiquitous software like a browser or an app, nothing special to download, no equipment to maintain, et cetera, and running all of this very, very powerfully in the cloud. So what are the real benefits of a cloud-based alarm management system to you? Well, saving time by having the cloud process that data and information for you. Installers can save hours and hours and hours of preparing data for each client, which is actually what is needed. And then users save hours and hours and hours of processing time. We've had one end user quoted here who was on another podcast recently, who said that just for sort of like 20, 30 sites or so that they were trying to sort through 70,000 lines of an Excel spreadsheet every week, trying to work out what was going on with the sites. So you can imagine not only the time, but actually the demoralizing process that is in order to come up with a result that is probably then far, far, far too late. So that brings us to customization at scale. Installers and ARCs can now deliver using the cloud information tailored to each customer. You design those reports in the cloud, they run automatically, etc., using powerful databases and things like that, and you can deliver that customization at scale. In the past, ARCs, again, not a criticism, but ARCs are asked to provide a fabulous service at a very low price 24/7. Okay, now to provide then on top of that customized reports, etc., at scale for every single client is a very, very tall ask. They can't do it through their existing architecture, software, and operational piece, because the revenue from the monitoring is essentially just far too low. This kind of information, which is specialist and may only be relevant to maybe multi-site clients, campuses and things like that, but there's a lot of them still, many thousands. This can only really be done reliably and efficiently in the cloud. And improved communications, ARCs installers and end users can now work from the same tailored data set. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the fact that a lot of the time, if you want to talk to the ARC, you need to know your chip number or whatever it is, and that's driven by the architecture inside the ARC. That's driven by the receivers, etc., etc. With a cloud-based solution, you can now put in loads of different custom data points. If you want to say the postcode, if you want to have your own custom reference, if everyone's using the same single point of truth and it's cloud-based and administered potentially by the end user, then that information can be kept more up to date, more slick, et cetera, and the communications can be far better. And each party, again, doesn't need sophisticated software downloaded, et cetera. They can all use it through a browser or an app. And what we mean by that is, obviously, you can do it on the fly. So you can do it when you're mobile, which is also a huge benefit of cloud going forward. You can have the sales teams, the engineers, ARC operators, mobile loss prevention managers, etc., all using this technology, whether they're at home, on the road, in a store, etc. Nike recently said connected is the one piece of technology they turn to every day to manage their estate. So they're realizing the power of the cloud and getting a benefit from all of these elements. So just one last quick example. It's well known that Next use our product. They use it in the security sales team that is based in JCI to help them manage their estate. They use it in their private SOC to look at events. They haven't had to install any receivers, etc. It's just via browser. Their loss prevention team use it. And there's a whole bunch of statistics there to show what those use cases are, et cetera. But this kind of technology can be deployed very quickly, very simply, tailored, and allow the security professionals, wherever they sit in the supply chain, to actually start managing risk and performance instead of actually managing data and trying to get that to the customer on time. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. It's been a pleasure to present on Security Buyer Live. That's the conclusion of our presentation. If you'd like to know more about our technology, you can look on our website, which is www.connected.com, or talk to any of our sales team, Callum Bush and Darren Ashfield. Thanks very much for your time.